afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you are going to be sitting in, the people at the door, we could maybe get started. So lots of conversations have happened so far through last night and this morning, and what we intend to do today is discuss the future of India-US ties and the India-US partnership from a slightly different lens. Through a Quad lens and also through a younger lens than we have had so far. So let me introduce my panel to you. Curtis Reed, the Chief of Staff at the NSC. Curtis, thank you very much for joining us. Paris Washington of the Johns Hopkins University, also a Quad Fellow, and Divya Ramesh, also part of the fellowship program and currently at the University of Michigan. Divya, thank you very much for joining us. We've just actually had a meeting of the Quad, and the joint statement said very clearly that the objective and the idea that the Quad intends to work on is to create a free and open Indo-Pacific that is inclusive and resilient. It also seeks a region where no country dominates and no country is dominated. That is the overarching objective of what the Quad hopes to achieve. Curtis, I want to understand from you, in light of the objectives that the Quad has articulated very clearly, but specifically in the context of the deeper India-US partnership, which are the areas that you believe we need to focus much more on, especially ahead of the Prime Minister's visit here to the US as well? What would you like to see being prioritized?
Thank you so much, Serene. It's a pleasure to be with you all today and to be with you, Divya and Paris, our two incredible fellows here. Really appreciate the question. You know, in his first weeks in office, President Biden made it a priority to elevate the Quad to a leaders level engagement again. And he just had his fourth leaders level summit in Hiroshima on the margins of the G7. And I think, you know, for the president, it's really, the Quad is really a critical strategic framework. You mentioned the free and open Indo-Pacific being the ultimate goal, but it provides an opportunity for four resilient democracies that believe in free market economies, believe in trade, to strategize on issues across the board, be it security, governance, the international order, economics, and trade. And I think the thing that really ties in what we're talking about today here in terms of the Quad Fellowship is the fact that we have combined kind of the importance of people-to-people ties, which I think will come up again and again during Prime Minister Modi's visit next week. You know, a huge Indian-American diaspora in this country connects us to India in a way that we're connected to a number of other countries around the world. But you know, looking at what the challenges are going to be of the 21st century in the Indo-Pacific region, I think the fact that we have this fellowship that brings together 100 fellows from the 4 Quad countries every year to study here in the US and to study in STEM fields, you know, and we just heard a little bit from Divya and Paris, who can share more about what they're studying, but you know, some really innovative you know, doctoral and master's theses going on, from computer science to human genetics to engineering. And I think the importance of this is that we're building connections that don't rely on the government to carry them forward. So we'll have a generation of scholars who have worked on science and technology issues closely together from these 4 countries, which I think will really build a connective tissue going forward in these areas.
Well, you know, you talked about this next generation of leaders and the importance of people-to-people contact and engagement. So let's get the next generation of leaders in on the conversation. And Paris, I'll start by talking to you. And for those of you in the room, I had the opportunity to ask Paris what she's working on, and something that interests me deeply: sleep deprivation, and that's what her PhD is on. So Paris, you know, what was the motivation for you to want to be a Quad Fellow, and what do you hope to achieve at the end of it?
Oh, thank you so much. So my motivation for really being a Quad Fellow was to really get exposure to these international collaborations and also to international cultures. My interest really is in scientific communication and outreach, despite not only studying sleep, but I'm really passionate about scientific communication and outreach, and particularly making basic science literacy and basic health literacy culturally relevant, especially when communicating these ideas about science.
You know, you talked about communicating scientific principles and scientific ideas in a way that's much more nuanced and contextual, Paris. I want to understand from you, you know, especially through the course of the pandemic, we were not just dealing with the virus, but we were also dealing with the pandemic of misinformation on many levels. As a young person who is driven by science and who's dedicating your life's work to science, you know, what do you believe, both at the government level, but also at the level of civil society, at the level of technology companies, what do you believe stakeholders need to do to be able to deal with this?
Oh, sure. And I think I was starting to touch on that a little bit, but really this concept of basic science literacy and basic health literacy, in particular in a country like America, and even extending this globally, when you have various different populations and groups of people, particularly those that have been historically marginalized or have a reason to mistrust science and technology, the way we communicate public health policy and scientific information for public good needs to be highly nuanced and needs to be tailored to the communities that you're trying to reach. So having cultural competency when communicating messages about science is really important. But also even the basic science literacy concept that science is not a stagnant field. It's fluid and it's consistently evolving. So even having that fact and communicating that when communicating information and new information about vaccines and viruses is extremely important.
Yeah, well, you know, you're talking about technology, and again, I was chatting with Divya just before we came out, and Divya's focus area is on the issue that everybody is talking about, and that is artificial intelligence. And so, Divya, you know, how long before algorithms take over everything?
I think, as Kamal was saying, not anytime soon. It really depends on how we're thinking about technology and how we're thinking about AI. So, yeah, short answer is not very soon.
Well, you know, that's good to know. At least some of us may have our jobs for a little bit longer. But, you know, explain to me, we just heard from Paris on why she wanted to do this. Explain to me why you decided to take this up and what you hope to be the tangible benefit or impact at the end of it.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So as Paris was saying, I think the cross-cultural collaboration was very interesting to me. Also, as a computer scientist who's studying responsible AI, I am very interested in translating some of my research interests, research outcomes into policy suggestions, policy advice. And the Quad Fellowship promised exactly this, which is bringing together a cohort of people, both mentors and fellows, who are interested in society, but also have experience with the public sector, the academic, and the governments. So really, this was the motivating factor,
and you've just gotten started.
Yeah,
so
just
it's only been
started,
a week.
Yes.
But you know, you talked about responsible AI, and I think many people in this room are grappling with what that is going to mean eventually. And I think governments around the world are trying to understand whether it can be regulated, and if can be, what should you do? What kind of regulation? You know, where do you sit on the are you on the fence on that, or do you believe that you know, should there be regulation? Should you leave it free to the market? What's your thought?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So for me, the question really is how can we center equity in innovation so that it benefits the larger society? What kind of levers do we have now? What kind of levers do we need to make that happen? So it's the question has multi-layers of answers, and that's what I'm looking at in my PhD.
Okay, well, we'd have to take that conversation offline to continue having it. But, you know, Curtis, what I want to understand, and what we've heard here from Paris as well as Divya, is that this is really an attempt to get younger people from across the world to be able to share, engage, and hopefully arrive at policy decisions that are much more harmonious. And one of the challenges that we were talking about here this morning was that there is, you know, there's of course regulatory arbitrage, but also that there is just too much different kind of regulation coming at you from different parts of the world. At least for this region with the Quad leadership, do you believe that this could be an attempt at a greater degree of harmonization, a greater degree of appreciation and understanding?
No, that's a good way to look at some of these issues, I think. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why the Quad can be such a powerful venue, is that you're taking four, countries that have significant resources in terms of technology and science and their ability to conduct research and really be at the forefront of all these different areas that we're talking about. And so I think, working on these things together and then having our governments working, side by side, if the four of our countries are able to come up with what we view as the right standard, it could set an example in the region and indeed around the world as well. So I think it's that collaboration on a strategic level that can help us break through some of what you're talking about on the back end.
Paris, one of the aspects that the Quad is looking at, and it's been an expansion of the work that was being done on the vaccine front in the context of the pandemic, and then now the Quad is working on a sort of larger health security partnership aspect. From your point of view and your lens today, how important is it to get the world to look at some of these large issues, challenges, health challenges in a much more uniform way?
I think it is very important, even if on a global scale, I think it pertains to the general individual. I'm of the belief that people cannot take advantage of, advocate for, or against things they don't understand. So it's pivotal that on a global scale, we're able to have this health communication, this health messaging, and even this scientific messaging that allows, again, equitable participation across multiple groups and populations of people.
Divya, in the context of technology, and it's changing pretty much every day, do you believe that a grouping like this and leaders being able to sort of talk about what the future could look like, how do you see that playing itself out?
Yeah, for me, so with responsible AI, I think what we're missing currently in the conversation is about the contextual differences, the different kinds of social interactions, the economic and the political contexts that shape the same technology in different ways. The use of the technology is very different. So for me, this banding together these four different countries really fills in that gap. And so I can look at the fellows in these different cohorts and countries and understand what it means to build this framework for responsible AI that really centers equity and innovation both together.
We heard this morning from the ambassador, and similar to what we've just heard here from Divya and Paris, the attempt is to build out a pipeline of talent and capabilities, even in the infrastructure space, and a fellowship program there as well. Do you believe that this could be a sort of model, the 100 of them, and then now we're talking about fellows in the infrastructure space? Do you think that this could be a model that could be replicated across different sectors of interest, from climate mitigation, which is one of the objectives or focus areas of the Quad, to health and so on and so forth?
I certainly think so, and I think that's something that we would love to foster and to see. I think what's innovative about the Quad Fellowship is it's managed by Schmidt Futures. It's funded largely through the private sector. And so it really is something that, while the government is involved and it's been a key deliverable for President Biden, is something that could expand quite easily. And, to different sectors, including the ones that you mentioned that are really top of the Quad's agenda. And I'll just say, having been a Foreign Service Officer for the past 20 years, I think some of the greatest impact I have seen is in the fellowships and the exchanges that we send bright young minds on from the countries that we're serving in. And that's a really lasting bond with the United States, but also with each other when you're in a program together. So I think from our perspective, it'd be a wonderful thing to see this built out into additional sectors as well.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it could be something that could lend itself to other sectors as well. But Paris, we're talking about the private sector's participation, and in many ways it is private funding that nurtures the kind of research and development work that's happening, the cutting edge technologies and so on and so forth. But as someone who is at this point in time looking at research, looking at R&D, what is the ask that you have of the private sector, and how do you believe that there can be a much more robust interchange of ideas and a mechanism that connects industry and academia in a much deeper way?
Trying to think of a way that doesn't necessarily place the onus always on the scientists, but very interested in increasing the basic communication in a way that I would even call jargonless communication. So being able to share these scientific ideas and these scientific benefits that is clear for everyone, and then we can go on and make those options accessible and more equitable. Because again, understanding really is the key, and being able to communicate these scientific ideas so that everyone has an understanding and then everyone can benefit.
Yeah, you know, Divya, you brought up the issue of equity, and in the context of the private sector nurturing and fostering innovation versus the government coming in and supporting it through grants and so on and so forth. But when you need to address these challenges and address them at scale, I think you need all hands on deck and all stakeholders on board. So, you know, how would you like to see this relationship, you know, be taken forward?
That's a very interesting question. So I think that there are benefits with collaborating with the industry, industry-academic collaborations. There's obviously the question of scale that is impossible, less possible otherwise. So I think that the industry really is the backbone of cutting-edge innovation. But we need to start thinking about how can we make this more, accessible to all the populations. What are models of innovation that might, right now it's, transparency is a big challenge currently with AI innovation especially. So what are different models of innovation that we can think about? And I think this is where the academic and the government partnerships can really inform something going forward.
Yeah, Curtis, you know, on the issue of innovation, on the issue of R&D, what role do you believe in the world that we are about to sort of move into, which continues to be driven so deeply by technology, which is ever changing? What is the role that you believe governments can play in all of this?
I think, as we've seen across a number of issues, be it from the COVID-19 pandemic to some of the issues we're talking about today with AI, I think it's important that governments working alone, domestically, and then obviously collectively internationally, because our economies, our research is so tied now, to set the baseline. We don't want to have regulations that prevent research and development from moving forward quickly from partnerships with the private sector. But you also want to make sure that it's done in a way that is safe for society and kind of provides a common framework in which to operate.
Mm-hmm. So what is your hope? You're sitting here with Divya and Paris, and of course there's 98 more of them working on some of these issues that we spoke of. What's your hope, from this fellowship program? What do you hope that it will achieve?
I think I hope a few different things. I hope that, the 100 of you in the class this year and then the hundreds in years to come will form kind of like an innovation hub amongst yourselves. These are 4 countries that obviously have significant ties already, but you're working in fields that are so on the cutting edge. And then having personal connections with each other. You're all civically minded, and I know there was an interest in attracting fellows that had an interest both in public service but also in private research. And so really just having this cohort of thoughtful people that are leaders in their scientific fields going forward, I think is going to be a really powerful engine of innovation.
Are you feeling a burden of responsibility, Paris?
A bit, but I will say that was a sense of responsibility and a desire to do service prior to even being accepted into the Quad Fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Divya, we spoke about what motivated you to sort of take this up, but as you sort of go through this process and you've just about started, what to your mind has been the experience so far of the ideas or the notions that you had of what this would entail, and what would you like to take away from it at the end of it?
That's a very interesting question. For me, it's the friendships. I think we just came back from Melbourne last week. We had a blast. We were all,
Not much science happening in Melbourne, I would imagine.
Science and a lot of fun. So these friendships are really the ones that I treasure, as Curtis was saying. I'm looking to have it. The fellowship is just the beginning of a lifelong journey of impact. So I'm looking to see what comes out of this, maybe 5, 10 years down the line.
speaking of friendships, and I'll ask you this in the context of the Quad, and it's an unusual grouping that's come together. We've discussed why it's come together. It's been a short journey so far, but Curtis, how would you assess the impact of what has been achieved since the Quad was set up?
Well, I think, maybe most importantly, the Quad really provides a strategic framework for the region. You mentioned a free and open Indo-Pacific. So, emphasizing the importance of the rules-based international order, of freedom of navigation, of free market economy. We're for resilient democracies. So that kind of sets a framework, I think. And, it creates an environment in which other countries are allowed to, encouraged to partner with the 4 Quad countries as well on a lot of these issues. So I think we've seen it really as a tool that can be used for a wide range of issues. You just mentioned the pandemic response and vaccine development, talking about clean energy supply chains. So I think for us, it's just important that it remains a vibrant platform that we can continue to add some of these critical and emerging issues into.
You talked about critical and emerging, so let me talk about the ISET in the context of what the Quad is also hoping to achieve, because that's specific to, of course, India and the US, a deeper partnership on emerging and critical technologies, and the hope is that we'll see more forward movement and amplification at the end of the Prime Minister's visit here. How significant is this going to be, especially given the role and relevance of technology, issues like technology transfer, which have been deterrents previously? Do you believe that we're past some of those legacy challenges and moving forward?
I think what we're really trying to do, you see this across the world, from our IPEF initiative to APEP here in the Western Hemisphere to ISET specific to the US-India relationship. I think we're really trying to create forums, venues, partnerships where we can deepen some of these alliances and work out some of these issues. Many of the kind of hindrances you mentioned are highly technical, and we have to look at issues in both of our countries to work them out in detail. And so I think that the importance of these initiatives is that they provide the kind of platform to do that work.
So, mentors, inspiration, where do you get your inspiration from, and who do you look up to in terms of mentors?
Well, to be quite honest, it's not a scientist at all. It's my mother, it's my grandmother, it's those women in my family who were doing it and paving a way before they had a degree, before I was here, and whose shoulders I really stand on. So those are my mentors and who I look to.
And what inspires you to do the kind of work that you're doing?
Still them. I'm native of DC, and so is my family. We've been here for at least 4 or 5 generations. So getting into that transition where I was getting further and further in my scientific career, and I became the spokesperson for my family when I got into those clinical spaces, when we got into those health spaces, and then transitioning into being that voice as well for my friends and extended family. So again, they really are my inspiration, and my community really is my inspiration for promoting basic science literacy and basic health literacy, because when I think about somebody being able to advocate for themselves, I'm really thinking about them.
And what does it take to sit in a lab and stroke mice for 6 hours a day, which is what you do to try and keep them awake so that you can actually discuss the impact of sleep deprivation as part of your research?
That's coffee. That would be coffee. But honestly, this is really, my inspiration is the fact that this is a means to an end. Right now, I'm stroking mice with a paintbrush and then harvesting brains, but somewhere down the line, I'm going to be being able to advocate for even the therapeutics of sleep deprivation and the therapeutics for sleep disorders, and being able to communicate that in a way that is understandable and then makes the subsequent healthcare more accessible.
Well, I think I speak for a lot of people. We hope that you have a breakthrough really quick, Baris.
Me too, I'm very tired.
But you're clearly not stroking mice for 6 hours a day, Divya. So, what keeps you going, and what has been the inspiration so far and the mentors that you look up to?
Something very similar to Paris. I think my mother. Women who are in patriarchal societies breaking the glass ceiling. That's been a huge inspiration to me, and I look up to people, women of color, people of color, who are, trying to expand the world and make it different from what they inherited. So that's been kind of my inspiration, and also seeing that there's huge disparity in society, and we have a long way to go before we can realize the benefits of innovation in more equitable ways, and that's kind of my inspiration to keep.
Elon Musk or Sam Altman, who would you pick?
I think I would pick a different woman of color. Thank you.
Good for you. Good for you. So, Curtis, let me end by asking you. I mean, especially in public life, and in the times that we live in, where there is such a degree of uncertainty and volatility, where do you find your inspiration, and what is the message that you would leave to young Quad Fellows or young people who are looking at wanting to be part of this program, maybe in the future?
No, I really appreciate that. I mean, I think honestly, my inspiration comes from people like Paris and Divya. I have the opportunity in my current role to talk to a lot of college students, high school students that are interested in careers across the national security enterprise and the U.S. government. And I think it's really, trying to make these different career paths still ones that are attractive, where people feel that they're not weighed down by bureaucracy, but can make a real impact. I'm always really inspired by the dedication people have to serve their country, to serve our broader global community, but I think it's just making sure that we harness the best of American talent here in this country and in our government, and making sure that other countries have the same ability to do that in their public sectors as well.
Yeah, we hope that we will see young people in public sector and take up public service as well, but you're doing that in your own ways. Paris and Divya, we wish you the very best of luck. Curtis, thank you very, very much for joining us here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the Quad Fellows. And the future looks good. So thank you very, very much for joining us. Thank you. Appreciate it.